So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
It's October. We have a nice it's November.
That's right.
And we have a nice Hefeweizen here.
Very tasty.
We've got quite a lineup of cinema to get to. This was probably about 3 months ago one of the best lineups we could have imagined. We're going to go over Jojo Rabbit, The Lighthouse, and Parasite, all of which you could argue are from auteurs, or at least filmmakers with great personality and sense of themselves as storytellers.
Highly discussed, much buzzed about titles, if nothing else.
And speaking of buzz, let's get on to first impressions of Bloodshot.
What happened? What am I doing here?
You got yourself killed. You have been given a second chance. You have an army inside you. We call them nanites. They rebuilt you.
Those are in my blood.
They are your blood. Welcome to your future.
Alright, we just watched the trailer for Bloodshot, starring Vin Diesel. What's your first impression?
In the beginning, I was slightly excited and thought, ooh, lots of action, some decent special effects. This might be as fun as Venom was. And then it proceeded to kind of, look like the worst parts of a Michael Bay movie, or the most recent Terminator film, where the dialogue was half-hearted and the angles looked bad on a background setting that looked bad. How about you?
I don't know that I would disagree with any of that. I think my response is kind of a boring one. I'm not familiar with the property. I don't have super strong feelings about Vin Diesel in general. Don't love him, don't hate him. He's just Vin Diesel to me. It looks like it might be entertaining enough. I don't know why. The first other movie that popped into my mind was Punisher, or The Punisher. Mm-hmm. Something about the kind of self-serious aggression of it kind of brought that to mind. Looks like it might be a little too self-serious. But I don't know. Maybe if it's just briskly paced enough that it would entertain me. Looks like a possibility.
I'm hopeful there's more action than what I just saw. What I'm worried is that it opened with great action and then had a big action set piece with him falling and elevators and stuff. But other than those, it was all kind of trying to convince me that his story matters. I think we've seen enough movies in the establishing of a superhero's background to know that that doesn't matter when the content looks like this. In the Joker, that works because the content looks interesting, even if it doesn't look good. It still is a level of interesting at almost all times, whereas this just looks boring. Kind of like a casual Michael Bay ripoff, lacking the beauty that he can conjure to seemingly mundane kitchens and bedrooms that are from the future.
Yeah. All fair points. I don't know that I necessarily see it rising to the top of the list of many, many films to see in the near future.
Oh, certainly not.
But we'll be curious to see what people think.
Yeah, it could be an interesting performer. Right, it could hit that $200 million mark if it's not what it looks like. Also, Guy Pearce is in it. That was quite surprising to me. That, to me, in the back of my head, that means that there might be something more interesting to this property, because he is kind of finicky for good screenplays, even though most of the good screenplays he picks normally turn into shit movies these days.
Yeah, I have a certain affection for Guy Pearce way early on in my movie-going days. I just somehow identified him as one of my favorite actors at the time. I think it was particularly after The Count of Monte Cristo.
Ah, yes, me too. That and The Time Machine, right?
The Time Machine. I don't know that I saw that.
Yeah, H.G. Wells adaptation.
Oh, I don't know that I am familiar with that one.
Yeah.
So I do have a certain affection for him. I'm interested to see him pop up here. But will that be enough to get me to it? Not sure.
Maybe. It depends on if it comes out in February.
That's exactly right. That could help its chances.
All right, on to Bombshell.
You have to adopt the mentality of an Irish street cop. The world is a bad place. People are lazy morons. Minorities are criminals. Sex is sick but interesting. Ask yourself what would scare my grandmother or piss off my grandfather. And that's a Fox story.
Oh, it makes so much sense.
Women are everywhere. We're letting them play golf and tennis now.
HR's on the phone because you called me a skirt.
Yeah, I gotta read that manual again.
The attitude off camera was even worse. You're a man-hater. Learn to get along with the boys. You're sexy, but you're too much work. I have a whole list. Will other women come forward?
All right, Michael, that's the trailer for Bombshell. Trailer number 2, if we're going to be specific. It's got quite a bit more meat on it. What do you think?
I did not see trailer number 1. I think I had just seen some of the stills from this movie that first came out a little while ago. Definitely want to see it. I don't know that the trailer necessarily raises my expectations or lowers them. I think the main...
What were your expectations then?
Kind of neutral. I mean, just intrigued, but not overwhelmingly excited. I think the appeal is the cast, and I remain open-minded. I don't know that I have any strong suspicions in any one way. What about you?
I definitely agree with all of that. The one thing that comes to my mind is it kind of it looks clean, and in a way that Spotlight looked clean. It doesn't really try to put the form over the content in any way. It just maintains kind of an interesting level of prowess filmmaking wise consistently, which is very hard to do in the harsh lit settings of an office environment, I think personally, which is interesting. I'm not too sure what the punch is going to be to a film like this. I am interested to see if Margot Robbie can somehow turn in this performance to be another Oscar nomination, and maybe use it to get an Oscar win. She's acting as good as she acted as Sharon Tate in Tarantino, except for she has extended dialogue bits here, which could really put her over the top for that. But it's almost startling because I've been seeing so much of her Harley Quinn trailers, and I just personally don't like the look of that movie or the look of how she's acting in that film. And she seems much more capital A acting in this, and I find it much more interesting. Yeah.
I mean, in general, movies like this, just dramatizations of recent true events, high-profile media events, just don't really compel me. I mean, I think they're maybe going to be more interesting decades later as sort of, reflections of the
way that we interpreted something. Yeah,
exactly. They just don't usually mean that much to me. I can't think of any example of something like this that just really blew me away. But what's more interesting is just to think about what it is, reflecting about it so quickly after it happened, in movie time at least.
Yeah.
And what that will, sort of look like in the future. So.
The one thing I am very happy about is John Lithgow putting on a fat suit again.
He looks good.
He was great as Winston Churchill in The Crown, and he looks like he might be great as Roger Ailes in this. I expect to see kind of a dark horse campaign for him as Best Supporting Actor.
I could see that. Very into whatever it is he's doing here.
Which is being his best version of evil. All right. On to the titles for the week. Let's start with Jojo Rabbit.
When I was your age, I had an imaginary friend. Got me in so much trouble.
Kids
some books!
You're growing up too fast. 10-year-olds shouldn't be celebrating war and talking politics.
Heil Hitler. I wish more of our young boys had your blind fanaticism.
This is directed by Taika Waititi. Of
starring a little bit Taika Waititi of Boy and What We Do in the Shadows and the What We Do in the Shadows television show and Thor Ragnarok fame.
Hunt for the Wilder People.
Ah, yes.
That's one of the few that
I knew there was
his
one
that
more.
I've seen. I've seen Hunt for the Wilder People as well as What We Do in the Shadows. I did see Boy, actually. So it's just Thor Ragnarok that I did not see. I think he's probably
That's a
got some
fun
other
one.
titles.
You could put that on easily. Gabby wouldn't complain.
Yeah. This is, in case folks are not familiar with it, this is set during World War II.
Yes, it is.
It is about a young boy, a young German boy, who is a would-be little Nazi.
Well, he's part of
imagination.
the, what is it, Jugendkinder? He's part of the Hitler Youth, which all children that were not being murdered at that time had to be part of. And it's presented kind of as a conscription for public service, like at the point in time here when we would have our boys join Boy Scouts, they were just joining the Hitler Youth. And it very interestingly opens up with, which I thought was a great metaphorical point, with the conjunction of the Beatles playing and people reacting to Hitler, which I think is something that's very lost in the contemporary attempt to understand these people that we view as villainous, and most of them maybe weren't quite as free-willed into hate speech and thought as we think. They were more thinking that they were nationalistically going along with something that they didn't understand the consequences of. And I think it does a really good job of exploring the idiocy of people that when they don't know the truth.
Which is tricky because it's mostly about kids. So do you think, are you left with the feeling that these kids were idiots?
No, I think these kids were kids, and I think that growth has many stages, and so does propaganda. And I think that the German propaganda machine, especially in the form of film, is one of the greatest propaganda machines that we've seen since the rise of the newspaper press. I would say he's a kid and he's been badly brainwashed to believe some very ludicrous things about Jews, and that's where most of the satire is aimed in emphasizing the ludicrousness of the beliefs instilled in these kids and the hatred that that they're being indoctrinated into. And then it's about this boy's struggling to reconcile that with empathy he feels, that he's surprised to feel when he finds a Jewish girl in his house, in his walls. I am pretty mixed on it overall, which is... Did you laugh?
I did laugh.
Did you laugh more than 6 times?
More than 6 times.
Just a
probably about
number?
5 or 6 times.
5 or 6 times? Okay.
Yeah, I think it is funny. I do think the humor is clever. I think for me, it's the kind of a similar issue I've had with Waititi in general, which is just that the sentimentality is pretty straightforward in a way that I just don't find that interesting. I think the quirkiness is kind of conventional in a way. Like, it's pretty crowd pleasing in its quirkiness, and I just don't think it really is willing to engage with the queasiness of what it's really about in a sufficient enough way for me. I think it's too concerned with the cuteness with the humor, and I don't know. I think it just comes up short in really acknowledging the horror of what it's all about. It just fell short of that for me.
I think that where I'd push back is that the quirkiness and the sentimentality are extremely conventional and do build up a very, I think, crowd appeasing, but also like crowd appealing in the sense that it is identifiable to every single audience member when Scarlett Johansson is really just rocking in this movie. She's doing a great job performing, especially for the content. And when she grabs the ash and smushes it on her face and then pretends to be the dad and then totally does a complete reversal of helping her son process his very complex emotions about his father being lost to the war, that she can't tell him he's actually a rebel fighting against the thing that he believes in because he thinks his dad believes in that. And the way that she navigates that in the movie, and then when she's hanging and we see her shoes and the development of those shoes, I think that there's a deep well of darkness in the movie that is almost hilarious because of the way that it's depicted with that the people are being depicted with love, regardless of who they are. And I thought that was kind of the bigger conversation he was having, was he's showing Thomasin McKenzie and the boy in the film in the same way, and he's letting them each act out and kind of be mean or cruel, but he's not doing it with a judging lens at any point. And I thought that was really genius. And when he starts to use his lens to judge, it's at points when Sam Rockwell is being loomed over by Stephen Merchant, and it just looks like, what the heck?
That's a funny shot.
And it shows, like, you know, these villains, like Sam Rockwell is the leader of the Jugendkinder Nazi group, and then he has a moment of kindness that we don't really discern until after Thomasin McKenzie reveals something. And then he goes on to, you know, develop a gay relationship with another man. And there's a subtle subtext to the film, I think, that isn't really subtle at all, but the way that he presents it is subtle, I guess. That I think is very, I think it speaks to more depth than maybe you're sounding like it has.
It was not, it did not strike me as of that much depth. That is correct. I think you'll disagree with me on this, but to me, how the public hangings were shot, how they were framed, I think is actually kind of representative of the biggest problem here for me, which is that it is purposefully not willing to look at the horror of what it's about in the eyes.
Yeah,
in a way that I found
R-rated.
very troubling.
Okay.
I mean, I think there is value in a crowd-pleasing take on this kind of thing, but to me, it's also pandering in a way. Like it's still leans too much into wanting to be cute and not queasy. In a way that I just couldn't shake. It is funny and it is cute, but I also just come away from it feeling like it's too cute. I just.
So I think we have two different reads. And I guess I want to see where you line up on this. Do you think that his goal is to not be queasy? Or do you think his goal is to pass MPA ratings so that it can get a wide release instead of an R-rated release?
I haven't put as much thought into what his goal is versus just how it made me feel.
Okay.
What do you think?
I think I line up more with the intention of getting this into the hands of children, which is the subject of the film, more than I think that he was deliberately trying to make things not queasy. But you might be right. Maybe in his head, he thought that, like, if I make it too front on, then children won't stay through it and engage with it in the way that he would deem is the right way to try to interact with the work. You know, maybe they would put their walls up and be like, oh, this is something that I can't understand. I do respect, though, that it feels like something that someone can understand from the current generation without having to do any historical research at all. And I think that the content has value. Even though your points might be right, I would still say that it's more valuable than not valuable. And honestly, the shoe was just as sad for me as it would have been to see her dead face. It would have been a different thing to see her dead, bloated face, I would say. And so if you wanted to see her dead, bloated face and all the others, yeah, I get it. I kind of wish it was more Peter Louis as well. But I don't know. There is a place for this type of glimmery, shiny surface work art that does have a little bit of depth to it.
I disagree. I don't know that I would want to show this to a kid and say this is a softened vision of what really happened. I think you need to wait until you're sure that your kid can understand how like absolutely awful this was. Like, I don't know that this is the kind of family. This isn't the kind of thing that I think warrants a family-friendly approach. I wouldn't want my
So you're
my
viewing
kid
it as
to,
a historical depiction?
It's a period piece, period satire.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think that that might just be another thing. I think that I might view it more as a contemporary criticism, as well as so it's playing in the historical-ville land, but I think it's more contemporary leaning, personally. That's just how I'm inclined to interpret it. But I totally get your point. Like, if we're talking about understanding the horrors specifically of World War II as the absolute purpose of the film, then I agree. I do think that it's playing a little bit of double speak with contemporary culture, though, and that's where I'm trying to. That's what I'm saying about that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think you can have contemporary takeaways. I mean, in a way, I don't know that I'm really at a point right now where I'm in the mood to laugh at Nazis, though. Like, with more and more, far-right ideology coming back to life. Like, I don't know that I really want to laugh at it right now. But, yeah, I mean, I think it has contemporary resonance. And it maybe if it was me just a little more willing to acknowledge aesthetically how sickening this kind of is, I would appreciate the satire a bit more. But I just don't know that for me it's the kind of thing that I want a family-friendly version of. Yes.
Agree to disagree, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think that art like this has a place and a purpose, and if it is upsetting, then at any level, then maybe that's a good thing.
That's the thing,
be
though,
out there, though.
I don't know that it's upsetting enough. Like, I think people are going to say it's a cute movie. That I don't know. That just leaves
even
me
if they say it's
icky.
a cute movie, the subtext of the cute movie is that the Nazis all die. That a young boy lets go of his awful beliefs and kicks them out the window. And I think that the subtext of the movie isn't a bad lesson. If it's taken the way that I interpreted it, perhaps.
Oh, yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think there absolutely is a worthwhile lesson about a kid, about, just the confusion a kid would have to deal with when he's been taught one thing and then is confronted with an instinctual sense of empathy. I mean, that core through line, I think, works. It is actually why I think my rating will be higher than it would sound like I might have given it based on my comments so far. I think that does work, and I think like the particulars are usually pretty good. Like, I think the cast is good. I think it looks pretty good. It's more just kind of the general conceit that I don't know does as much for me as it has others.
It's beautifully framed as well. One of my, I don't know, the subtext of the film is the thing that gets me, right? Like, Thomasin McKenzie is actually, I believe, a Jewish New Zealand girl who we'd last seen in the film with Ben Foster, which was Leave No Trace, right?
Yep. It looks like she's grown up.
She sure does.
Yeah.
And she's looking like a great actress. Like, she might have a bigger range than we were aware of when we watched Leave No Trace. But the particular subtext of the film that I find the most enjoyable and snarky and makes me smile is that Taika himself is a Jewish New Zealand person as well. And he's the writer, director, and plays Hitler. And just knowing that he gets to make fun of Hitler as a writer, director, and performer as a Jewish person puts a smile on my face.
Yeah. Sometimes when directors cast themselves, it can feel a little vain. Here, it's like he's not going to have to... He doesn't want to have anybody else have to play Hitler. He was like, if I'm going to do this, I will at least bear that responsibility. I can appreciate that. And I definitely like Thomasin McKenzie. It's already sentimental enough. Like, if it had been played, if it had evoked more pity for her, that would have been even more problematic for me. I like that she's tough, that she's like pushing back against him.
Yeah.
That's great. And that was a surprise for me. I thought for sure it was going to go the other way, where she was going to be cowering in the corner. That was fun.
Yes.
I did appreciate that. And I think the friendship with the other boy, I forget his name.
Porky, right?
Is that his name? Yeah.
I feel like it is.
He was great. He was a funny kid.
Yeah, hilarious.
And the lead kid is
he's really
fantastic.
Good.
Yeah. Very easy company, even if he is a wannabe Nazi.
Yes. I don't think that's true in real life, so
right.
I'll grant him a pass.
Thank God.
On to The Lighthouse.
Tell me, what's a timberman want with being a wickie?
Just looking to earn a living, just like any man. Starting new.
On the run. Keeping secrets, are you?
No, sir.
Why don't you spill your beans?
Do you hear that?
What do you hear?
The sound of the lighthouse. The call of the lighthouse.
I hear ocean waves. I hear a horn. I hear farting. I hear all kinds of things.
I hear a seagull being smashed to smithereens.
Whoa, that was intense. That caught me off guard, no doubt.
I think that we agree on this film.
I think so. I think your words gave it higher praise than I did. I think we...
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, you said it was... one of the most engaging period pieces, right?
Yes.
In the entire history of the medium. Those are bold words.
Yeah. I think that when I sat down, just personally, I was so engrossed that I didn't ever look at my phone's timer and think like, okay, this movie's this long and I've sat here for this long since the trailers, like I normally do. I was just 100% engrossed in what was going to happen next. I didn't feel like the film was perfect or overtly love it or any of that stuff, but as far as like direct engagement with the piece of cinema, it had me by the face, and that's worth just as much as anything else in film.
Yeah, I was a big fan. I would confess, like, there were times where it lost me a little bit. It's usually more during scenes of dialogue. If I could, I probably would have used about a quarter less of dialogue. I think what I felt most was scenes of them just going about the daily drudgery. Those shots that give it such an atmospheric feel. I didn't have as much of a problem with not being able to understand all the dialogue in The Witch, because I was always able to like follow the broad strokes easily enough that I was just terrified, regardless. Here, like, the core of the movie, is their relationship. They kind of have these, like, highs and lows. One scene, they're ready to fight. The next, they're jolly and dancing. I just wasn't always able to follow, like, what exactly is leading them from one thing to the next. And that's probably the point. They're kind of going crazy. I was not, like, totally involved in the dynamic between them, even though I was able to understand it and follow it in a general kind of way. That maybe just kept me a little distant from it, but I think the general vibe is extremely compelling and it's fantastic looking and sounding.
Yes. Interesting. Dialogue was one of my favorite things about it. It just felt so lived in and owned. I don't necessarily understand every word that is said, but I understand it served to understand the manner in which they were speaking, so that even if you didn't know the content of the speech, you understood the intent behind it, which allowed me to keep up with the scenes. As far as the going mad thing, it's, for me, it was something between that and being really, 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 really alcoholics, that made me kind of lean into the I don't know what mood they were going to be in this turn. It's got some weirdness to it, like as far as breaking the scrimshaw and whether or not that actually broke the curse or not, whether or not there are elder gods, that type of thing. But what I liked about it is, if you've ever read H.P. Lovecraft, this is kind of the most H.P. Lovecraft a movie could be, because it's not at all about something mysterious that controls someone. It's about the humans going about their day-to-day life slowly devolving into total insanity. And then that one insert shot that makes you think maybe there's elder gods, that I found very engrossing and fascinating. But just the look of the film is unprecedented.
Fantastic looking movie, no doubt.
Did you listen to that interview I recommended?
I did not. I don't have any hard and fast rule about when I listen to interviews and when I don't. Here, there was still so much left that I just hadn't gotten a reading on yet, that I kind of thought I would wait. Like, I kind of want to
it doesn't cover the content at all. That's why I steered it towards you.
Got it.
Because it's just about
share with me
the craftsmanship. So the earliest lens that they use in this film is from 1903.
Wow.
And that's part of the way that they got this look, is by using all these different lenses. I believe they said like the newest lens they use is from 1940, and they shot it on, some super fancy version of Kodak black and white, where once it hits a certain threshold of black, it does something called bottom out, which is what allowed the look of the film to have this. And they didn't actually shoot it in the aspect ratio it's projected at. They shot it in something like 1:119 or something weird. So yeah, no, that's why I steered you towards it, because it's just it's so maddening to learn like what they did. And I mean, it does, in the interview did elucidate, like, they didn't do rehearsals for dialogue. They did rehearsals for the blocking, because they had to bend their bodies in order to actually be in the frame.
That's hilarious.
So it was just about learning how to be in the film at all while they said their dialogue, that they had to rehearse for the film.
Yeah.
And that's one of the first times I've ever heard like anything like that, where it's the actors were simply rehearsing how to make the film look right, not their parts necessarily, not, their identity or the dialogue, because these two actors are so vastly accomplished and so good at the craft.
Yeah. That does sound like a safe listen. Sometimes I just don't want the mystery taken away quite yet. You never know if a director is going to be like, that doesn't mean this means this, which I think directors should always just stop talking about that kind of thing. I never am interested.
And I've never sent you a interview link that would have that content, because I know that you wouldn't listen to it. I send you very few interviews.
Carefully chosen.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the craft is high caliber, no doubt. That is far and away the crux of the appeal for me. And just that sense of isolation. For me, I always took it kind of literally. I didn't think of it so much as there being any mythical component. I did most of what I saw, I assumed was within these guys' heads. And I just was completely wrapped up in this sense of just being so miserably alone in the company of someone who's kind of driving you nuts, which kind of competes with the desire for company, particularly of a sexual nature, and how you just would get cabin fever, and it would just be unbearable. And to me, that's what I read that the seagull as indicating. It's just this taunt that the seagull can leave anytime it wants, and it drives him literally insane.
Interesting. Okay.
Just a small nugget.
I buy into that as a viable interpretation.
I appreciate that. And I think they're both great. I can't quite decide if sometimes it's a little too stagey for me, or not. I think I mostly was okay with that.
I like the staginess, personally. But you're right. It's too stagey to a point where I'm not recommending this to either of my parents.
Yeah.
At all, ever. Not even if there was a fire.
My parents would hate it.
But
Dad, don't watch this.
I still love it, you know? And it's in that line of tomfoolery almost, where it's like, we're taking this very serious, but the content is so absurd to anyone that isn't willing to take it seriously.
Yeah. Completely mesmerized by the craft. I wish I had just followed some of the plot details better. The backstory with Winslow, it felt meaningful to me though, because there's so much of this sexual imagery. And then to have that backstory about Winslow, Robert Pattinson's character, about this incident at the lumber mill when he was a lumberjack. And I just couldn't tell. I'm like, was this an accident? Was he into this guy? It feels like he had an affection for him. Like there's desire there.
Certain subtext going on.
Yeah. But it was less a question of like, what does it mean? That's usually a fun question versus what did he just say? That's usually less of an interesting question. So there was some mild frustration there, but it was kind of undone by just the craft because I was wrapped up in that. So.
I was leaning towards the idea that there's no way that he would have edited it for there to be a clear interpretation. I kind of treat it like Paul Schrader's First Reformed, where it's like he edited it specifically so that you couldn't have the one correct interpretation of the film. So I was less engrossed in those ideas, and I personally assumed that like the intent from Eggers is to just trust the way that you're feeling and go with the film as much as you can, and just trust that, and you'll probably end up where you should, as a viewer who's interacting with something.
I think that's possible, but I just don't know. Like, I suspect that if we were to read the screenplay, we would be like, oh, that's what he said, and that would probably mean something to us.
Yeah, but
it's
would
a different
it change
kind of
the
ambiguity. Outcome? I don't know. That's okay. Why, like, yes, I completely see the deliberately added ambiguity in First Reformed, whereas here, like, I can't tell if I was supposed to have understood that backstory better than I did or not. That's, I think, where a little frustration came in. Again, still very positive, but I think there is this give and take between the period speak adding real texture and you not, or me feeling like I'm not sure if I got what I was supposed to.
To me, the outcome is so unimportant. You know, like, it just makes everything unimportant the way that things go. So I just didn't. In retrospect, I don't see too much importance to those. I'm more interested in, like, was that dead body actually there? Are the Elder Gods actually a subtext to the film? Was that siren actually there? Those types of things. If we're gonna start, like, treating the film like what it presents as real, I guess. Because even then, the subtext of the film is that you can't trust the interpretations of these characters. Mm-hmm. And that flashback is a subjective flashback. So, like, why should I even trust what he's doing? Is kind of what's going on for me personally. So
yeah, well, I completely agree. All of that is great. You know, whether or not these visions are real, whether or not the mermaid is there, or anything like that, all that is great, and that's where I think more of the visual storytelling is done. But when Willem Dafoe screams, "You spilled the beans!" and I don't know exactly what he spilled the beans about, if it was an accident, if it was intentional.
Oh, it was his assumption of the man's identity.
Oh, right. But whether or not, like, it just seems like there were meaningful details that I wanted more from that probably would have gotten me from, like, a 4, just very good, to a 5. It just...
Yeah.
I think the period speak became a little bit of a hurdle in relation to those.
But would you want no period speak?
No.
Yeah,
I would keep it. It's definitely worth it. But I think that is what kept me from getting higher than I did with it, while the craft is completely absorbing.
Yeah. And when you say the craft is completely absorbing, I would say the craft from both the men in front of the camera as well. Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson are as good as they've been. I think that, personally, Willem Dafoe's greatest performance very well might be found here or at Eternity's Gate. You know, even though it's a superhero movie, his turn as Green Goblin was incredible. And then Mississippi Burning, he's phenomenal in. Like, this is as good as he's been. And same for Pattinson. I can't think of another role where I enjoyed his performance as much. I'm not on the hype train of Good Time. That's like a 3.5 to 4 for me. Really like it. Didn't really get on the wavelength of his performance. Might change on a rewatch. Just kind of where I landed the first time. Didn't know what I was getting into with the softie film. It was my first softie. So, you know, I normally people point to that, but, like, can you think of a better Pattinson performance than Good Time, which I know you're a huge fan of?
No, not particularly. Yeah, I mean, I liked him in High Life, but I don't think that's what I liked about that movie necessarily. So yeah, I would agree. In terms of his filmography, this is probably up there. What about Cosmopolis? You liked Cosmopolis, right?
I did. That's a good point. That might be up there. He's very... Yeah, it's a totally different role, but he's very engrossing in it. Yeah, I might go with Cosmopolis as well. Good point.
Generally speaking, I just usually lean towards the less is more kinds of performances. So I like Willem Dafoe in something like The Florida Project. It's very different from the bombast of this.
He is good. I do think there's something a little bit different about a supporting performance than a star performance. So
totally
I'm not gonna really think about things where he's definitely a supporting actor. Mm-hmm. He's a great thing that brings life to that, but I don't know that I'd say that, like, as an actor, that's just an incredible performance. You know, I think I need a little bit more capital A out of it.
Capital A acting? Is that what you said? Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I thought it was great.
So perhaps Eggers, while he's a great auteur, is actually best at putting an actor in a situation to be mesmerizing. He did it first with Anya Taylor-Joy before she had risen to fame at all. And he's done it with two guys who are already pretty famous and given them perhaps their best roles, or one of them.
Yeah, I would think so. I still, this is just my personal takeaway. I could have used even less of them. I like the shots of them just going about their business, the exterior shots, all of that is what really adds to the atmosphere for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I completely see what you're getting at.
Yeah. A few more anecdotes before we close out. The entire, everything you saw in the film was built for the film.
I like
all
that.
of it. And second, he was talking about Nosferatu in like a past tense.
Oh, maybe it's already in the can?
So it's very possible because we know that he's about to begin production on The Northman.
Yeah.
The Northman. So it's either scheduled to begin production when everyone's thing is free and he's already finished the screenplay and it's approved by A24, or it's already been shot and they're delaying it till 2022 for post effects or something. I don't understand, but so
appropriately shrouded in mystery.
So yes, there's a lot to look forward to between Nosferatu being spoke about in the past tense and the Northman moving forward with Skarsgård and Kidman, I believe, in the next 6 months. So
good things ahead.
Eggers is going to give us one a year, perhaps, for a while. On to Palme d'Or winner, Parasite.
제시카 외동딸 일리노이 시카고 과선배는 김치모 그는 이사촌
부자인데 착하다니까 진짜 니가 착한 거지
I'm deadly serious.
Directed by Bong Joon-ho. Parasite, a South Korean film, probably the most buzzed about movie of the year, I would go ahead and say.
The most buzzed about South Korean film since probably The Handmaiden, right? Shoplifters is close, but
I think that's probably safe to say. I think it is a great movie. What about you?
I agree. It is a great movie. However, for this conversation, I watched it a second time so that I could have seen it more recently, and it turns out that when you already know the content of the film, it is less engrossing, and the first time I watched it, the thing that made it so great was that it wouldn't let my face go, like I just talked about with The Lighthouse.
Yeah, there's nothing like a first time with something that has such a key twist.
Correct.
Yeah, I suppose I didn't have as transcendent of an experience with it as many people have. I'm going to chalk that up to just having really high expectations, right? Sometimes this much praise, this much buzz doesn't do a movie any favors because it just gets me so overly excited that it can't possibly hit that. And I have nothing bad to say about this movie.
It did the opposite for me, honestly, all the buzz. Because I was thinking oh man, I really didn't care for Shoplifters last year. I gave it a 4, but I didn't really like it at all. So this is probably going to be another thing that I don't really like. As far as Palme d'Or winners go, I like very few of them. The way that they're responded to publicly, Blue is the Warmest Color and Sex, Lies, and Videotape are probably the only two that I'm anywhere in line with the Cannes judges on. This is a transcendent work of cinema at this time.
Yeah. I've had movies like that before. That happened to me with Manchester by the Sea, where I was like, that was a great movie. Not sure I get the hype. And I saw it a second time and I just knew what I was getting into. And then I was like, wow, that is a great movie. It just took it to the next level for me. I think that would happen here because I have nothing but good things to say about it. For me, it's just an expertly managed tonal juggling act.
Mm-hmm.
You could describe this in so many different ways. I think of it as a socially conscious home invasion thriller with elements of family drama, slapstick comedy, and outright horror. And all of those are woven together pretty seamlessly. And it's thrilling with really clean ideas woven in. It's a good movie, if you can't tell.
It is a good movie. I think it's just so consistent that you just are kind of dumbfounded by it, because it's never got a weak spot. Like, you can't really go, well, it was a great movie, except. This is one of those rare movies where there is no except. There just isn't. It's kind of like a David Fincher movie that way. Like, you can't point at a Fincher movie and say it's great except, unless you're going to say something that's prevalent in the whole film. Right, you know, and that's the same thing we see here. The casting is amazing. The performance is completely committed, and the slow build of the smell of boiled rags and people that live in half basements, the visual communication of the geographical location as far as where you are in height, and how that tells an incredible story when we see someone who's in a basement on a hill who seems like drivel flush their toilet and know that this family miles away, very far down the hill, is now being flooded by that very flush. It raises a whole new perspective to like class warfare and that type of stuff. So it's visually interesting. It's thematically interesting. I just don't know on the second watch if it's there again, or if it relies too much on the reveal of the basement to really be a perfect film. And that's the point of criticism here. Yeah. It's not a perfect film, Michael. That's my criticism.
Yeah, like I can't point to any real flaws or things that bother me about the craft, but I have wondered, like, is there maybe just not enough like ambiguity to it for me to really be as wondered by it or impressed by it the second go round, right? I think like the ideas about inter-class relations and then intra-class relations are pretty directly woven into the plot. So there isn't a lot of room for interpretation. I think everyone can pretty uniformly agree exactly what this is about, which I think has been maybe deemed I don't know if it's been deemed a good thing or not, but that seems to be the case, and I maybe like for something that leaves me a little more room to think.
Yeah, now I'm at that point where you'd watched it the first time before I'd watched it a second time, and I kind of disagreed, but now thinking back on your comments, I think I do lean more that way. Like, specifically your point about ambiguity, like who are the villains? It's unanimously the dumb wife and the rich husband. And the fact that that's all they are, and there's like no redeeming quality to them, they're not interesting in any way. They don't really have their own backstories of complications or interest, really makes me come down on the film. And it's not like I watched the movie and was like, oh, that's so obvious. It's just like, as I think about why I'm reacting this way, it's like, okay, well, if there is no reveal now, then I'm spending more time with this stuff, and this stuff is empty. Like, it's easy to forgive the kids. They're kids. You know, they're still growing and developing, and she's falling in love with our main boy. The son is an artist who's troubled, and the sister's interaction with him is fantastic. And then there's just this empty well of stupidity that isn't even explored, like the background of, you know? And I'd like to see a background on like why she trusts people's recommendations instead of herself to go find things. Like, that could be interesting. And I think we do spend enough time with the family that we could have spent a little bit differently to actually explore that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking I might go higher on it on rewatch, having now known what I'm getting into, whereas you've gone the other way. It's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. I will be curious to see on rewatch which way I go. yeah, I don't know what else to say. There's lots to chew on. I mean, I think you're right. The visual storytelling is key. These ideas of high and low and those, representations of high and low class. And I think it is a very clever surprise, right? That this family thinks they've found this secret ladder into upward mobility, and it turns out they're fighting for the same rung on it with somebody else. I mean, the idea is crystal clear, and I just wonder if it's maybe too clear.
Yes.
But it also is great. It's quite thrilling. You talked about the compositions. Like, I do think there's so much visual information in detail. The motif of scent is obviously constant.
Yes.
But there's that one in the car where the wife,
has her feet up on
her feet up. I loved that touch.
On the headrest.
So
and
good.
Then is plugging her nose. And just the deep... That's the point. Like, while that is hilarious at a surface level, the back to that is that, like, she's that uninteresting of a character. Like, she's not doing that with venom or vigor or anything clever about her. She's just doing that passively. And that, for me, makes the play of it much less interesting.
Yeah.
Because there isn't an ulterior motive. There isn't a clear background as to why this is happening. There's just nothing besides her behavior. And her behavior is abhorrent at some level, and we all agree and move on.
Very oblivious at the least.
Yeah, that's so not real. Like, bad people aren't really that one-dimensional. And that's what I don't like, the one-dimensionality.
Yeah. Maybe it's just being familiar with his other work that can be so crazy. I think the twist is great and how it feeds into the
story?
theme evolving.
Yeah.
I don't know that it just totally knocked me back on my heels like I thought it would. Plot twists aren't everything. I don't know why. I just thought there might be something even crazier going on down there. To say that I don't even want to say this because I like it so much overall, but I would confess I was maybe just a teensy bit disappointed by the reveal. Still good. Still very positive on it, but it's, I don't know. I just wanted something even further out there, maybe.
Yeah. The first time I watched it, I was like, okay, this isn't, insane, so we're still staying within the bounds of the universe, because I didn't know if we were going to go Okja crazy or not. And I kind of liked that we didn't that first viewing. And then I was very intrigued by the idea of Morse code through the lights, from someone underneath trying helplessly to communicate with someone so far outside of their purview or their jurisdiction or their monetary area. First the husband who had been living down there, that would do the lights as a thank you. And that he would Morse code the thanks every night as well, and turning into the communication between the boy and his father. I found that very rich. It felt very Great Gatsby the first time I watched it, and the second time it just kind of lost a lot of the movie, lost that intent for me. It turned into a lot more of a just walking thriller, because I already knew the twist was coming, and it was just less interesting. The stuff that I still find interesting to chew on is the ideas of the bathroom in the half basement where the toilet is at the highest part of it, and it's the only part where they're equal to the guy that pisses in the street next to them. That's where they have to go to steal the Wi-Fi. They're stealing the waste literally, and they have to go up to do it to even be on the same level as thieves. The fumigation scene, that's the stuff that I find interesting, and it's honestly when they leave the basement and kind of stop interacting with those ideas of class that I just kind of got bored.
Yeah. Yeah, I like just how they get integrated into the family and how it's all about recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's more about cunning than credentials to make your way up the ladder, right?
Yeah, but there's no background to that. That's the problem.
For me, there was enough. Like, I got the sense, like, that the girl is actually talented, right? When you see her,
No. That's interesting. It's just like why are they going off of recommendation?
Well, that feels actually very real to me. Like,
yeah, it does, but there's no meat to it. Like, I want to know why.
I very much related to that. That, like, you feel like the only way you can break into the upper crust is if you know somebody, no matter what you know. It's the power of, connections and brands that can feel so unfair. The little touches with the U.S. quality goods that the husband and wife keep talking about. They're like, I wish I could remember a specific, but they're talking about different things they have, I think. And they're like, oh yeah, it's from the U.S. It's good.
Yeah. The bow or the arrows for the bow. Yeah,
exactly.
That's how you know it's good.
Yeah.
And then that's where she went to Illinois art school, and that's how they know she's good.
Right. Again, it's sort of that just,
and it's he speaks English. That's how they know he's good.
Yeah, this just sort of blind belief in the value of certain things because of the reputation or the brand or something like that, versus any sort of like real scrutiny of what they're buying or who they're inviting into their house.
Yeah.
And what that brings for them. I think is pretty clever. Yeah, I mean, when you think about watching this, side by side with Snowpiercer, do you think of these movies as treading too much of the same ground? I've been kind of wrestling that with myself, or is this a meaningful progression in the Bong Joon-ho oeuvre?
No, they're both dealing with similar themes and theses, but they're definitely walking on different ground to get there. And they have different outcome variables, right? Where the end of Parasite is literally like his manifesto is to get rich and buy the house. Like the most uninteresting manifesto ever. And the end of Snowpiercer is to abandon everything you know and try to not die in the thing that would surely kill you. Which I find much more engaging, and the presentation of performance and violence in Snowpiercer was much more engaging. I just recently rewatched it to make sure it wouldn't be in my top 10 of the decade. It's not, but it's probably top 50. It's a great movie. I don't think Parasite would be above it, to be honest. Yeah. I think Parasite's going to drop down my list quite a bit now. So I do think that it's playing with the same stuff, but it's not got the same outcome variables in mind. Whereas I think Okja's maybe more in line with Snowpiercer than this.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think I maybe responded more to the ending in Parasite than you did, and the kid wanting to buy the house. We hear about the dad always scurrying away when things go wrong or something like that. I liked the idea that it was out of shame, that this is about, in part, a father wanting to be able to provide a lifestyle like this for his kids, and how that ultimately comes full circle, and a kid wants to provide that for his dad, for his family. I think for me, the ending did manage to then show both perspectives in that way, about parents wanting to provide for their kids and vice versa in the long run. Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, that's a valid point, and that is interesting to consider. I think that's the best interpretation and the most interesting one that you could have for that ending. I don't know that I love it, but I definitely like that more than the way that I watched it the second time, which was just kind of exhausting. Once again, to bring up a movie that I can't believe is still being brought up by me this much, that I had no intention of speaking about this often. It just reminded me of The Last Black Man in San Francisco, and the goal of getting the house and how empty of an idea that is, the material wealth. I mean, it's a valid point to like want to care for your family and stuff, but the house doesn't mean too much compared to another place that he could buy immediately and sneak his dad out of that house. You know, like, if I actually like put myself through the ringer on thinking that through, like, just get a different house that's much more affordable that provides you the same level of pleasure that you can get earlier and quicker, and then hire someone with the extra money to sneak your dad out of that house and go get him, and boom. You know, like, if I was to think that all the way through, I don't
bothersome
get it.
Yeah. The movie I ended up thinking about after the fact was Us, Jordan Peele's Us, just for the motif of the high and the low of classes and the marginalized. I would actually maybe sort of liken Jordan Peele to Bong Joon-ho, maybe kind of think of him as a kind of U.S. counterpart, just in being interested in crafting socially conscious thrillers.
That's an extreme compliment you just put on Jordan Peele.
Yeah, I think the craftsmanship is different, for sure. I think this is a better
I think it's definitely
film.
Different. That's a nice way to say not as good.
Yeah. To me, while the craftsmanship is maybe of a similar caliber to someone like David Fincher, I think of David Fincher as being pretty humorless. He doesn't usually weave that much humor or comedy into his movies versus
I think Social
like
Network,
Us.
Zodiac, even The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo have a layer of uncomfortable laughter to them. Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Those
the
feel
Social
very
Network
solid
for sure.
to me. Not in the
Zodiac
same way that
for sure.
I think Us does or Get Out, where those are laughs.
Oh yeah, irony. Yeah. Peele has irony, whereas, but I mean, if we're just saying laughs in a Fincher movie, I mean, the Robert Downey Jr. interactions with Jake Gyllenhaal in Zodiac, particularly, are like just hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I think of Gone Girl, Zodiac as brooding, dark thrillers. They might have comic relief.
Yeah,
but I would not consider comedy to be a strain in them, really, in the same way that it is in.
You mean as like part of the genre of the piece?
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you meant like content-wise. And it was just Fincher's got some pretty brutal laughs.
Yeah. And just kind of the motif of doppelgangers. Obviously, it's explicit in Us, but there is a one-to-one match, you know, of the families in Parasite, and the obliviousness of the privileged to the marginalized.
Yeah.
I think rings just strike me as similar. I think I would rather watch those two together than this and Snowpiercer, which I feel like are maybe treading too similar of ground. I don't know that I can quite get at why. I think.
Why do you think Snowpiercer and not Okja?
Because of it, when I think of Okja, I think of most of the ideas there are like about environmentalism, whereas I think about these other ones that we were talking about as more explicitly about class.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the subtext of Okja is, I think, what I would point to as being the same. Whereas, overtly it's about genetically modifying organisms and the outcome of factory farming. But underneath that is the class system and all that stuff. Well, yeah, and in this, I guess the subtext of, like, when we see the father is he's dealing in these electronic goods that we don't really know how to interpret. Because we don't get enough time with those.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you can extract class, like, entirely from any of them. I would probably put, even though I haven't even seen it, I'd probably put the host in Okja over in the more environmentally conscious category. The class thrillers, Snowpiercer and Parasite, and maybe a different branch of his oeuvre.
And then we just need to watch Mother.
And Mother, Memories of Murder, that's more Fincher-like. But that has real slapstick comedy to it.
That's
right?
Another one I need to see.
Oh, okay, sorry. But interesting body of work.
Favorite performer for me was the dad of the low-class family. I was just astounded by his performance, and I've been meaning to look up his particular list of credits and kind of do a cursory search of what the best is and go watch those, because I really responded to him as a performer. Really like what I saw.
I think I would agree. He maybe has just the most comedy pathos, and he's also kind of frightening. It's all kind of wrapped up into one, right? When he's just on the brink of hitting his wife, that was uncomfortable.
And then begins laughing.
Mm-hmm. Just really carefully managed tone there.
Mm-hmm.
He's
or when he's smoking without any hands while he's folding pizza boxes during the fumigation.
Nice, impressive.
Yes,
he's good. But yeah, strong cast. We haven't really talked about ensembles, which we'll get to, right? When we do our year end of the list.
Yeah.
I think this would probably be up there for me. I think it's a pretty solid cast.
Probably not for me, but I agree it is a solid cast. I think I'd put Climax over it for sure. I'd put the Don Quixote film, The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, over it for sure. And then just like obviously, Arctic.
right. Big cast, sprawling.
Yeah, just huge casts. The Polar Bear, great performance.
Oh yeah. Well, should we sound off?
I think that's it for now.
Until next time.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
You're the best and we love you!
And that's another one in the can.